Welcome everyone to Suburban Action Week, day number 4. Tonight, the session is about Bike Walk Oak Park, and we've got Sylvia Schweri, who will be presenting about their advocacy efforts, and I'm Maggie Sherwinski from the Active Transportation Alliance, and I've got Crispina Ojeda-Simmons, who is one of my colleagues, and she'll be assisting with the Q&A after Sylvia's presentation. And if anyone has any questions or comments for Sylvia, please add those to the chat and we'll read those off after she presents. So I will turn it over to Sylvia.
Great, thanks so much. And thanks for having Bike Walk here this evening. We just kind of want to tell you guys about what we've been up to for the last, I don't know, year plus. Introduce ourselves first, and then talk about our kind of big projects of the year, which were implementing slow streets over the summer, and also candidate surveys, which we're doing now for the second election cycle in a row. So, and then in the end, you know, some thoughts about what works for us in terms of advocacy locally. So Bike Walk Oak Park is a volunteer advocacy group in Oak Park, committed to the fair and safe use of friendly streets by everyone, all our neighbors who walk, roll, ride, and drive. We're affiliated with Active Trans through Bike Walk Every Town. And we were launched in 2018 with roughly 10 volunteers, and we now have around 600 supporters online. We're still kind of a core advocacy group of maybe 8 to 10 committed individuals doing a lot of the more heavy lifting. And our ongoing goal is the implementation of the Greenways Plan, which is a network of streets that prioritizes bicycle and pedestrian travel and traffic calming infrastructure, and making it easier for everyone to travel and in a safe and a more attractive and comfortable environment. And it's really geared towards also all ages and abilities. We've been saying it's for people, for everyone 8 through 80, though I think we're gonna have to start bumping that upper age up, because it's really, it's, above and beyond everyone above 80. So slow streets, I know you all are very hip to slow streets, but just to kind of give a quick overview, temporary initiative that happened in a lot of cities and towns in response to COVID. And it was a network of streets that was prioritizing non-motorized traffic, just for recreation and also to get from place to place. We worked to locate those on low traffic, low speed streets, and I think that's how it happened everywhere. And in general, those streets overlapped the Greenways Plan. And so the light infrastructure we used was basically signage and barricades. And so, everyone could exercise in a physically distanced manner. Here's a map of slow streets in 2020. I think it's kind of interesting because I think even in a few places, they're trying to keep them in place, possibly make them permanent or semi-permanent, which is really interesting and very cool. And in Oak Park, we used the Greenways as a blueprint. And Bike Walk Oak Park worked very closely with the Transportation Commission to, we first proposed a route, and then it got kind of whittled down by the commission and also by staff, eventually village staff. So the Transportation Commission was behind it. They're generally pretty progressive in this stuff. The engineering staff was not, because I think they thought it was just a huge liability and, a chance for people to get hit by cars and be in streets where they shouldn't. So, but then the village board approved it 6-1, which was really kind of surprising to us. We did not expect them to, most of them to fall behind it like they did, and with relatively little debate. I think everyone by the summer was just looking for a way to improve the situation. I think some of the more business-minded commissioners saw it, or trustees saw it as a way to encourage traffic to business areas and encourage people to get out and spend more, I'm thinking. I remember hearing that said. But anyway, it did get approved. We were really excited about that. And then the cost ended up being around $40,000 because the village didn't own most of the barricades. They had to rent them. Here's just an idea of like what Bike Walk Oak Park wanted to do and what actually ended up happening is here. So you can see we just kind of shot the moon, and then it got whittled down to a loop. And it was instituted in 2 phases, the south first and the north later. And hard bike lanes are at the edges of those Chicago and Madison. So you could just do the small loops and you wouldn't have to try to do the whole thing, depending on where you wanted to go. So it was instituted on August 3rd and it ran through around the middle of October. So the survey, it was really good that they surveyed users during the pilot, and around 1,000 respondents, 3/4 of them were supportive, which was great. So like 61% strongly and 14 somewhat, which we'll definitely take. And we did a petition before when we were advocating for this, and we got 400 signatures in support. So we were really heartened by that and feel like all this is telling us that there's a definite desire for this type of infrastructure and for a place for more people in the streets. And if this is growing because of the pandemic, we'll take it because it's really good news. So the lessons that we learned in this project, I think are going to really help us as we move to advocate for greenways. It was kind of a tactical urbanism because we got to try out some of the routes that we were going to be, eventually advocating for in greenways, which would be permanent infrastructure. And we could kind of see how they felt on bike and just sort of test everything out, at least in the route that was implemented. And, previously we thought we should definitely approach implementation of greenways from a district perspective and have it kind of build out around schools. And we saw the schools as being the nuclei for advocacy for implementation. But now we're thinking maybe we need to just prioritize routes, north-south routes, and places where there are really difficult crossings, because that was a lot of the feedback that we got had to do with, this was really great until you got to X, and then it was really snookered up, and how can this be better? So, I think that we need to take that to heart and sort of talk about what we do going forward and how we're going to try and push for implementation. Onto the surveys. We did our first one in 2019, which was, we thought pretty successful. We did not endorse candidates. We basically graded them based on their responses to the survey, from supportive to mostly supportive, neutral, and not supportive. And then we shared our results through our Google group and our Facebook page. It was a very different election than our most recent election. It was very low turnout because it was mid-cycle. So only 20% of eligible voters actually voted. But in that sense, every vote was pretty important because there were pretty slim margins between candidates. So there were 12 candidates for 3 open seats for the village trustees. And in the end, the margins between the candidates that we ranked highly versus less high were fairly slim. And in one case, 53 votes. So you know, and that person was, I think, the person we ranked lowest, who ended up not making it by 53 votes. So, you know, we felt like that was maybe we had some effect there, and that was a good thing. And 2 of the 3 of the most highly ranked candidates that we in our surveys did prevail. So in an election like this, who knows? It's hard to say what sway we had, but we think that sharing this information was helpful to people and help people make decisions. So coming up, we have one in April. It's fewer candidates this time, just 7 candidates for 3 open seats. And then our village board president is also getting decided. So in general, right now, they're much more diverse and more progressive than they were in the last cycle. So there might actually be less of a difference in between these candidates. So hopefully our survey, which we are sending out in March, will help people decide based on how they respond in this issue area of active transportation. And we would be happy to share our survey with anyone who wants it, or to talk more about how we ran it and how we graded people. So just to sum up how we are kind of handling things and doing advocacy and how it's working for us. Of course, Bike Walk Every Town is a big part of it. So many resources there, and active transit is such a good ally. We are also just learning how our local government works. Who are the decision makers? What's the funding process? And you know, when are all these public meetings? And just making sure that we have those covered has been, you know, a learning experience, and also super important, and something that's really changing, obviously, in this climate where now it's about tuning in online versus, you know, hauling off to meet a 3-hour meeting. In some ways, it's gotten a lot easier this year, which is nice. And the social media presence, also important, of course. And then just having that reliable group of people that you know you can count on to do some of the less exciting things and some of the heavy lifting. And we also do partner with local businesses and organizations. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Wheel and Sprocket. They're really great, and we did some events with them in the summer when we were having events like that. So, and then finally, just a consistent messaging and outreach for your projects and initiatives. Sort of how we do it. That's our contact information. And thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions or just chat.
If you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them now into the chat.
I guess while we're waiting, if anyone does end up having questions, it was Sylvia, thank you for your presentation. It was great to hear about more details about the results of the Slow Streets pilot, and that it was generally looked as being a positive thing by the community, and
yeah.
And then also to hear more about your election advocacy, and excited that you're doing it again. And I was curious. So the 2 candidates who were ranked, who had a high ranking, and they were elected. Were they champions for you throughout the last 2 years?
I would say in general, yes. I feel as if, unfortunately, I mean, definitely in terms of the slow streets, yeah, we had a lot of support in general. I would say, you know, I think now it's coming down to where we're going to have to start getting back into sort of our normal routine of advocacy and pushing for funding. And so that's really where the time will tell. And I think people will be tested, because in this time of slim budgets, that's going to be where the pedal hits the metal. And so, you know, this coming year and the decision for 2022 is going to be, I think, kind of a litmus test for us, whether we can actually get any of the greenways funded. We had secured funding for a section around the high school last year, but then it was shelved. It was actually first delayed because of construction around the high school and then shelved once the economy tanked. So are we gonna be able to get that back, or should we try for something different? Question.
So we have a question from Larry Riley. Thanks for the presentation. My first question is, how did people on the designated routes react? Was there pushback due to restrictions on traffic in the neighborhood?
I think that the quarter of people that didn't like the slow streets in the survey, I'm not sure how many of them lived on a slow street, but I think a number of them probably did. And they were unhappy about it for reasons like that. I can't say that I read every comment, but the gist of a lot of them were, you know, why do we need this? And also just, you know, I think some people saw the barricades as a slalom. They just needed to get around them, and it wasn't always safe for everyone. Like, I'll just say it, I live near one too, and it wasn't always safe if you were biking, and people weren't driving as slowly as they could. So parking, I didn't read as much about parking in the comments. In some of these streets, parking is just not an issue because people have garages. So, but in some areas it was. So.
The next question is from Charlie Sachs. Who initiated the group? Was it a core of 10 active members? What precipitated the start of the group?
My understanding is that it kind of all came together when Divvy was eliminated in Oak Park. That's right around when I joined, soon after that. I think that's, if there had been an advocacy group before then, they hadn't really coalesced, but then when that happened, I think the thinking was, okay, you're gonna take this away from us. It was around $200,000 that was being taken out of Divvy and just absorbed back into the village budget. What are we gonna get in return? How are we gonna maximize ridership so that you can't say in 10 years, no one's using bikes, or, you know, that this service wouldn't be utilized, which was, you know, the reason why it was eliminated in Oak Park at the time. So I think that was a precipitating event for us coming together at that point. And it was, at that point, maybe just a handful of people, Jenna Holtzberg and Brian Crawford and Ron from Active Trans also played a role in seeding it, because, you know, you all know he lives in Oak Park. So yeah, did I answer that question?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. The next question is from William Chalberg. Could you talk a bit about what the slow streets experience was like for a pedestrian or cyclist?
Yeah, it's funny. I think it really, how easy or difficult it was kind of depended on what else was going on the street that you were on. Sort of in the commercial areas, the routes cut through commercial areas, and they weren't really continuous because you couldn't have the barricades up around parking lots and near schools. So, you know, sort of towards the middle of town, it just felt like you were on a bike ride, and it didn't feel all that protected. But, you know, on the north and south ends in the neighborhood, I felt safer, and I certainly felt safer with my kids on bikes there than I did. I mean, really, it wouldn't happen unless they were fixed to my bike or in their trailer. Usually it wouldn't happen, but we did a little bit of independent biking with, you know, a 5-year-old on a bike in the street. It's not often that you feel you can do that, but we did. So that was really cool. But it, you know, the streets are narrower in some places, and where that happens and where people are still parking because they can get away with it or whatever, you know, it could get hairy at times. It wasn't totally calm.
Okay, our next question is from Larry Riley. In selling slow streets to the village, were there any specific points that really convinced the board members to give approval?
Gosh, so here's where I wish that Jenna Holtzberg was here, who's kind of our chair. She was attending more of those meetings than me. I think in general, I just remember there being a lot of talk about the route in terms of getting people out and also getting people to like shopping again. There's a couple of our trustees who are they're business owners and they're very sort of oriented towards the business community. And so I remember that coming up a lot. And you know, how this could encourage people to get out and then just stay out more, or, you know, maybe bike to the business district. I mean, that wasn't a bad argument. I'm not sure if that was the majority of the use, to be honest. I think a lot of people just used it in their neighborhoods. But I think that probably swayed people. I think that you know, there was one holdout who was against it. And I think he was one of those people who just, any cost that was unnecessary was just one cost too high. And so I think that's why maybe he voted against it. But I think that people were swayed by the need to get people out of their houses. And you know, I think at least one of our trustees works in the public health arena, I believe. So I think a lot of people, there's just a good awareness of how this was good for everyone's mental and physical health. Mm-hmm.
And we have a question from Charlie. Does Oak Park have a complete streets ordinance? And does your group monitor development and infrastructure projects in Oak Park and advocate for implementation of complete streets?
Yes, there is complete streets ordinance. And we definitely do track projects. I would say our largest, one of our biggest wins of the past, you know, since we formed was successful advocacy for the Madison Street Road Diet, which, you know, was done in tandem with the reconstruction of most of Madison within the village. So that was in 2019. And that was hairy and almost didn't pass. So it's not every project rises to that level. I feel like Lake Street kind of just happened, and we, I think every once in a while, one of us would check in on the maps, but I don't, we try to monitor them all. And if there ever is a controversy or somewhere where we think something is really being left out, or where a crossing with the Greenway Street is not being paid attention to in terms of active transportation, I think that's where we try to jump in, because we know that those crossings are going to have to be, they're prioritized for the future. So if you're going to put money into a project now, you should definitely pay attention to them and invest.
And we have a comment from Larry. Thanks for the answers. In Glencoe, we are looking to encourage biking, walking. Strategies for including local businesses is key consideration. Great point.
Yeah, it can only help, you know, to get more people on board.
Another question I have, Sylvia, is do you know, is the village considering doing this again for 2021? Or are they still thinking about it?
I think the word that we got sort of off the book, like not on the record, is that it probably won't be considered. It's relatively expensive. I mean, $40,000 at a time when a lot of other things are being given a pass. And I think also, I think that if Oak Park is going to do it, they're going to do it 100%. So I think a lot of other cities got away with just slapping signs on barricades they already owned. But, you know, we got blinking ones. We got a lot of them. You know, they did it up, which is great and made it safer, but at the same time, it makes it a more expensive project. So I think, and I'm not sure, I think we all might feel differently within Bike Walk, but I myself would rather just see attention turned to permanent infrastructure at this point, because I think in the end it's going to be a more, sustainable investment.
That makes sense. I think that looks like it's it for questions. So I think we can wrap up, but Sylvia, thank you so much. It was great to hear about just what you guys have done. You've accomplished so much, and over a short, not since 2018, having 600 followers on your Facebook now, that's a great community of people who really care about this. And yeah, well, I'm excited to see where you bring Oak Park in the future, and keep me updated about your election advocacy, because that's something I like to share with the other advocates, and encourage more communities to get involved in doing what you're doing.
Of course, yeah, we most definitely will.
Yeah,
thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Crispina, and thank you everyone for joining, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a good night.
Everyone.
Good night.
See you tomorrow, Maggie.
Oh yeah, see you tomorrow, Bill.